I am giving away a free booster box of Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel Attack from the Deep. The link to enter the giveaway is in the description. Good luck, duelists. Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. Dungeon Dice Monsters was a mini-arc from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that even the most casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan can usually recall. It gave us a very alternate way to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, our very own Justin Timberlake and Duke Devlin, and a crazy clown rival to Grandpa Moto who physically beat his own son and tried to kill Yugi for revenge. Well, I guess that last part depends on which version you're referring to. I have wanted to do a video on the true origin story of Dungeon Dice Monsters for a long time now, and that is exactly what we will be discussing in this video. So without further ado, let's take a look at the horrifying inception of Dungeon Dice Monsters. Since I know there are a lot of people who did not read the original manga, I hope you all learned something new, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy the video. Quick warning before we begin, I probably will be referring to Ryuji Otogi as Duke Devlin, which is his English dub name, since it's just easier for me to say, and I'm more used to saying Duke Devlin. As you can tell by the title and the intro, the whole story of Dungeon Dice Monsters is way different in the original manga, which is what the entire anime of Duel Monsters is based off of. The arc takes place at the beginning of Chapter 76, in case anyone is interested in reading it, which I highly recommend you do. The true origins of this arc was a little too brutal and a little too intense in the manga that the anime decided to nix most of it and pretty much rewrite the entire story of the arc. In the anime, just as a quick reminder, Duke Devlin is angry at Yugi for defeating Pegasus, since Pegasus had promised to mass-produce the game of Dungeon Dice Monsters, a game Duke created himself. With Pegasus out of commission, Duke knew there was no one to produce his game, and thus he turned his frustration and anger towards Yugi, who he assumed must have cheated to defeat Pegasus. And to a degree, he wasn't wrong here, was he? Then again, everyone cheated in Duelist Kingdom, so it's all good. Duke and Yugi end up playing the version of Duke's game, with Yugi being able to figure it out rather quickly, and of course pulling off the win. Duke realizes the error of his ways, apologizes, and then later joins the gang pretty much permanently during Battle City. Well, this was completely, and I mean completely different than how it was in the original manga. I actually do not think there has ever been an arc in Yu-Gi-Oh! History that was curated this differently from the manga into the anime. Duke's true upbringing and story all starts with his father, Mr. Otogi, otherwise known as Mr. Clown. If you only follow the anime, then you don't even know about this character, since he never made any appearance and I believe was never mentioned in any way in the animated series. Although he did have a bizarre, unnamed, very quick cameo in Dark Side of Dimensions, which was easily the strangest Easter egg that movie had. Anyway, as we all know, Yugi's grandpa is a master gamer. He owns his own gaming shop, and so one day, Mr. Otogi asked Grandpa Moto to take him under his wing. Mr. Otogi was his student for quite some time, but eventually got a little too big for his britches and challenged Grandpa Moto to a penalty game in order to try and win the Millennium Puzzle from him. The shadow game they played was a game called Devil's Board Game, which sounds exactly like a game Bakura would suggest to play at a sleepover. Devil's Board Game involves you rolling dice in order to reach the goal, but for each die roll, you have to bet a number of years. If you lose, you end up aging the amount of years you bet in total. Mr. Otogi loses and ages 50 years in a single night. His plans were to capture the Millennium Puzzle, recreate the Devil's Board Game, and enact revenge on Grandpa Moto. And how did he plan to get the puzzle? Well, that's where Duke and Dungeon Dice Monsters come in. Duke's main motivations in the original manga have nothing to do with Pegasus or anything like that. His motivations are to defeat Yugi, to get revenge for his father, and become the true king of games. In fact, he even goes to school to test Yugi's skills and try to mess with his friends, similarly to what he did in the anime. The only difference is, Atem shows up during this and plays a card game with Duke in which he defeats him. Duke then tells his father that Yugi is extremely talented and gets smacked across the face by his dad, who goes completely bonkers at the thought of his son losing to the grandson of Solomon Moto. Duke's dad also rips off his clown mask to show his son, and unfortunately the manga reader, his disgusting, hideous face. Even his own son has a hard time looking at the true image of his father, as Duke instantly begs his dad to put the mask back on. The Otogi set up a plan to frame Yugi for a burglary, which leads to Mr. Clown confiscating his Millennium Puzzle before shoving him off into a secluded room. The secluded room is where Yugi duels Duke in Dungeon Dice Monsters. Not really duels, more like plays, but you know what I mean. Now you might be realizing something, but wait Dylan, didn't Atem face Duke in Dungeon Dice Monsters in the anime? Yes, he did. Another massive difference between the anime and manga version of this game. In the manga, Atem is not present. Neither are Yugi's friends or Duke's cheerleaders. The game has a much more 1v1 personal tone in the manga than it does in the anime, as it truly is the son of Mr. Otogi versus the grandson of Solomon Moto. No Atem, no friends, just Duke versus little Yugi. Another massive difference between anime and manga is this is the moment where Yami Bakura makes his big move. If you recall in the anime, Bakura takes a piece of Yugi's puzzle and kind of infects it during his duel against Bandit Keith possessed by Marek. Well, that duel never happens in the manga, and instead, it is this game that Bakura interrupts. He waits until Yugi defeats Duke, and he infects one of the pieces of the puzzle after it shatters in order to become a spy within the walls. Little Yugi does go on to defeat Duke, as I just mentioned, and that's when his dad goes completely insane. He strangles Yugi with the chain of his puzzle while yelling at his son, calling him worthless and telling him he has no right or reason to live. I mean, this is Duke's own father telling him this. Just absolutely horrible. Mr. Clown tries to reinitiate the Devil's board game by rebuilding the puzzle, but he fails to do so and ends up stuck in a labyrinth where he knocks over a candle. The entire room ends up catching on fire. Joey ends up saving Yugi and the puzzle, very similarly to what happened in the Bandit Keith / Marek duel in the anime. The entire building burns to the ground, and the horror story of Duke and Dungeon Dice Monsters comes to a fitting conclusion. So I'm sure there are a few of you who didn't read the manga wondering, what happened to Duke and his father after this arc in the manga? Did they show up again? Did they have a redemption arc? Well, much like in the show, Duke felt indebted to Yugi and his friends and ended up accompanying Tristan to visit Joey's sister Serenity in the hospital. Duke becomes a part of the main gang for the remainder of Battle City, pretty much identical to the role he played in the anime. So Duke's story was not like Miho's story in Season 0, where she was just kind of added for no reason. Despite having a much more sinister origin story in the manga, Duke was still a relevant supporting character in the Yugioh manga. As for his father, Mr. Clown escapes the burning building thanks to the help of Yugi. Man, it just shows how great of a guy Yugi is. Even after all the crap he had to go through because of this guy, he still helps him get out of the room and saves his life. Mr. Otogi admits he was wrong to his son as they watched the building burn down, right before he told firefighters that a young boy was in the second floor and begged the firefighters to save him. To my knowledge, that is the last we see of Mr. Otogi, one of the worst fathers in this story, which says a lot considering almost every dad in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a complete deadbeat, at least in the original series. The next chapter in the manga goes into when Kaiba and Ishizu met, and that is how the manga proceeds from the Dungeon Dice Monsters arc. As previously mentioned, this is all massively changed in the anime. There are some elements that are similar, besides the Dungeon Dice Monsters game itself. Duke goes to the school first to try and rile up Yugi and his friends in both versions, as well as Duke realizing after his loss that living with pain and revenge is not a good way to go about life. However, the emotionally and physically abusive relationship between Duke and his father is completely cut, as well as his father in general. I also love how they took the important events and moments from this arc and just stuck it into the Bandit Keith Yugi duel, which again is an anime-only duel. Joey saving Yugi from a burning building, Bakura showing up and supporting Yugi just to infect his puzzle. It's pretty fascinating, and I would have loved to know the reasoning as to why they cut out Mr. Clown and this storyline, even though I would assume they figured it was just a little too intense for the show. Then again, I feel like all the stuff Marek's dad did was just as bad, if not worse, but maybe because Marek was a villain and a much more major character, they felt they couldn't skip that stuff. Again, I'd love to know the behind-the-scenes decision on it, but what do you guys think? Did you know about Mr. Clown and the true origins of the Dungeon Dice Monsters game and arc? Please let me know down below, and let me know if you liked what they did in the manga more than in the anime, or vice versa, if you have read and seen both respectively. Really excited to hear from you all on this topic, and hopefully you learned something new. Also, if you have any other topics in regards to differences between backstories or arcs between the anime and the manga, manga, please feel free to let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. A special thank you to my Platinum tier patrons Alexa Baker, Glen McGookin, Jorge Carrillo, James Rose, Samuel Stark, Thomas Adderley, Horace Maye, Goosey Q, Vincent Van Der Veen, Rexkentrix, Jordan Osceola, and Smith620, and to my Diamond tier patrons Jesse Wood and Garrett Palmer, and to my Egyptian God tier patron Chris Swan. A huge thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. I truly cannot tell you how much it helps me out and helps out the channel. And a huge thank you to everyone who just watches these videos, because without you guys, I would not be able to do this. Thank you all so much for watching. I will talk to you all down below, and I hope you have an amazing day.